Hi, welcome to Almost Cooperstown.
I'm Mark.
And this is Gordon, and we love talking about baseball. So welcome to essentially it's episode 24 of Almost Cooperstown. It's 2020 season wrap up, and it's also in a lot of ways a season wrap up for us. We're kind of considering this episode the end of season 1. Afterwards, we'll be moving into our off-season stuff before we start up again in March of next year for season 2 with, the beginning of the baseball season.
And our most listened to episode is in fact the first episode that we did. And it almost pains me to listen to that because I hear the lack of production value and how, it was just not very good when we got started.
Yeah, and just how much we've gone through. But we wanted to just kind of talk about this week, just talk about the 2020 season in general, what we saw, kind of some of the things we'll think we'll see next year coming out of it, whether or not we have any, one of hot takes right after the season. And yeah, we just kind of wanted to get started. So, I think first of all, the most impressive thing about this season overall is the fact that it happened. Like the whole time, you more so than me before the season were very much like there's no way.
I agree. I did not think they were going to be able to get through it. I didn't believe the bubble could work when you traveled around and went to other cities and played the teams, away, during the regular season. And then they managed to make it through.
And you know what? Even looking like in football, like the only times it's been a problem is when the players themselves have deliberately done something against the rules. The rules are working.
Yeah, and despite what happened at the very
you
end of the season with Justin
it's
Turner,
like you kind of that doesn't really taint it in any way, but it's just like almost like it had to get its like last little touch in there to make sure that it colored the season in some way.
And while I certainly can understand, Justin Turner's a free agent now, right? He just came off a 4-year contract for $64 million. He's getting paid $16 million a year. That was possibly the last game he's ever going to play with the Dodgers. And they tell him during the 7th inning that you've got COVID, you got to come out of the game, okay, and you got to sit on the bench and wear your mask or go in wherever they told him to go, and then his team wins the World Series, so Rios is on the field instead of Turner, and he's got his whole story about how he got to be on the field at the end of the World Series when he should have been Turner, and Turner runs back on the field, and even if he had guys egging him on, get in the picture, take off your mask, it was wrong. He shouldn't have done that, and there's been so much pain and suffering here that as much as I could feel for him wanting to be there with his teammates, I don't know how you feel about it.
It's tough. Yeah. It's something you really feel bad about, and that, you wish it almost hadn't gone down the way it had, because the fact that it went down that way, I think makes it that much worse. The fact that he didn't find out until it wasn't like they knew before the game, and he had to grapple with the reality.
That's the problem with baseball in the first place, because they're supposed to test you, and you're supposed to know before the game, not in the 7th inning.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that more than anything else is the problem, so to speak. But at the same time, I'm just glad that we were able to get the full season. It was nice having.
Yeah, baseball and the World Series was a quality World Series, and the playoffs were great. And as we said in the season preview, they're the winners. Yeah, they won the World Series. There's no asterisk. Yeah,
those teams were playing quality baseball in the postseason the whole way through. And I don't think there'll be anybody that really questions that, or kind of by extension, seeing it as that Kershaw finally got his World Series, and I don't think the fact that it's this World Series is going to make any difference.
What a great pitcher, and what an opportunity for him to show what he's made of when he didn't have his best stuff and come up with a great effort when you knew he was just fighting it the whole way.
Yeah, and he was big in the World Series. He was really good in that postseason for the most part. And I'm glad he got one, because you don't have to. It never has to be a what if with him. You know what I mean?
Right.
There never has to be that kind of asterisk on his
he
career.
He never won the World Series.
He's one of the best pitchers of all time, but he didn't win a World Series. Well, he won a World Series now, and now nobody can question how great he was.
And the analytics-rich Rays, we'll just maybe touch on this for a second. So Kevin Cash takes out Snell. What is your thought about the hullabaloo, if you will, that came about because he was removed with 2 outs in the 6th inning?
I think, obviously, it's super easy for us to call it a mistake, and I think that's the wrong way to approach the decision. I think you can't approach the decision on whether like in terms of like judging this. I think more has to come from the framework of why they were making this decision. Were they making the decision because analytics told them this was the best choice that they could make? Was it some other reason? I think if analytics are telling you this is the best choice you can make, you as the manager have to be able to be like, look, I know what the numbers are saying.
I lived with this way,
but the numbers
all year.
Numbers are great at predicting a model over the course of a full season. They're not very good at predicting the outcome of an individual game. Right. If you looked at according to the analytics, nobody would ever throw a complete game shutout, but they happen.
But Snell didn't, had trouble getting through the third time in the order. They had these guys coming up, and so the rationale was, let's do what we do. We see that he's less effective, and yet what I felt they didn't look at was, could it be at that one game where the guy just had a really special night, and you should be able to notice that. Analytics aren't going to tell you if he's having a special night. He had 9 strikeouts.
The other issue is that ultimately, innings. No matter what, this is a results-based decision or a results-based evaluation. No matter what, we're going to be looking on this.
Right.
If they had pulled him and it works, it's the right decision. If they had left him in and it didn't work, we'd be talking about they should have listened to the analytics. There's really no winning here, unfortunately, outside of winning.
I just believe that, analytics, and I'm a huge data guy about trying to understand what to do and why. But you also have to look at what's happening sometimes. And while we don't want to go back to hunches, this guy, I just feel like he's got it today. No, that's not what we're saying. This guy showed that he had exceptional stuff that night in the biggest game of the season, and we're going to take him out maybe because he has a trouble going the third time through the order, but he struck those 2 guys at the top of the order out both times that he faced them. So I feel like you're not looking at what's happening.
And it's certainly telling that when he got pulled from the game, one of the Dodgers players was telling the story that Mookie just turned to him right then and said, "We just won this game." That's how the Dodgers felt. So I think ultimately it's always going to be an impossible choice to make, because whether or not you're right is basically whether or not it works out, which makes sense. But you can't really judge the process there, because you're talking about the war between analytics and the manager knowing his team. And I think, in my opinion, the manager, if you have a good manager, he recognizes that and goes with saying, "Nah, this guy's got it." And I know the numbers.
Right.
Otherwise, why have a manager and not just have a
robot will do it?
Yeah, just have a computer in the dugout that tells you what to do in every situation.
So we talked about the 3 jarring new rules in one of our podcasts this season, and so the DH is probably the one that is not going to be adopted for both leagues next season, because it doesn't come up into the collective bargaining agreement until the end of the 21 season.
And then I think you'll see it back. So I think it's going to be I think for one, we'll see it back after that collective bargaining agreement.
For both leagues?
For both leagues, I think so.
So how about all these pitchers that didn't hit for a 60-game season, and now, okay, they're going to go into spring training and they're going to have to be bunting in the National League and doing all those things?
I have a hard time believing it's going to have any kind of major impact on
pitchers couldn't hit before. And
they couldn't hit before, so they're not going to hit now. I don't think it's a big deal on that front, and I can't imagine that a year off from bunting is suddenly going to make it impossible.
So let's quickly look at the other couple of rules. The 3-out rule, which came about a number of times, the reliever coming and having to pitch the 3. I keep saying 3 outs. It's 3 hitters. The pitcher has to pitch to 3 hitters. And
3 outs would be brutal.
3 hitters, and how that did come into play during the World Series, and I think that's probably the rule that people are least bothered about.
Yeah, I think it's the rule I'm least bothered about, because honestly, it just changes the way in which you employ the strategy. There's still strategy involved. You just have to plan your moves 3 batters in advance.
So if we were to look at it in terms of the regular season, the purpose was to make the games go faster. But I don't know anybody that wants a playoff game necessarily to go faster. Why not scrap it for the playoffs and let them just manage the way they always do?
Personally, I think that and the offs. I think the 3-batter rule for the regular season, I think that's a great rule, because nobody wants to watch a terrible game between 2 terrible teams get dragged out an extra hour. I think that's a good
compromise.
So have that be a regular season effect, and then take it away for the playoffs, because that makes sense. The same way you don't have shootouts in the playoffs, right? In hockey, do you? In the Stanley Cup, or is it just...
No, it's overtimes.
It's just overtime. So you know what? You could totally have different rules. Then I also think for the rules of the extra base runner rule is the most contentious rule. I think this year's rule, starting them with a runner on second in the 10th inning, is wrong. It's too much. I would much rather see it go 10th inning, nobody on. 11th inning, guy on first. 12th inning on, you get a guy on second.
And I don't have the stats, and I will get them for another episode. In terms of how many extra inning games go beyond 10 innings, it's not as many as you think. It's less than 5% of all the games played.
And if you had that sliding scale upward, it would feel less cheap.
And you still could have it in the playoffs, but maybe you have it start in the 12th inning in the playoffs.
I think you don't have it.
You don't have it at all in the playoffs.
You don't have it all.
So
in the
you
playoffs.
want an 18-inning World Series
the
game.
same way. If you get the same way in football, if you could have 6 overtimes because nobody scored.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think that it would be hard to manage your staff if, in fact, you never had to play an 18-inning game.
Didn't the Mets do that in the '86 run?
The regular season game. There was a 19-inning game.
I thought they had
July
one,
4th.
I thought they had one during the against the Astros during
the season
But
itself.
has there ever been a crazy extra inning game like that during the playoffs?
I don't know of any World Series games that have gone past the 11th or 12th.
It seems unlikely just because of the way teams play, and there's a team you're going to play that game so differently than you would play any other game.
That's a good one. And Tim, what is the longest World Series?
Yeah, that would be an interesting thing for us to look up.
So there were some amazing performances this year, guys that you didn't expect. Why don't you talk a little bit about guys?
I mean, you have 2 guys
seasons.
I think kind of I think in my mind right now are kind of emblematic of the craziness of this season. So you've got the push-up man, Randy Arozarena out of Tampa Bay, who
I'm claiming that I named him the push-up man. By the way,
he's claiming that nickname. But I think it's just interesting because there's no reasonable way you can expect him to maintain that level of performance next year over a full season.
You don't think he's going to hit 11 home runs in 20 games or something like that?
Yeah. So yeah, you're
against the best competition in baseball.
Yeah, he's going to hit about 90 home runs while hitting 380 over the course of a full season. I don't think that's happening. But
the guy only had, I think, under 40 major league games in his career before the playoffs.
So the question now here's the thing. Part of me feels like you're just going to see this massive regression, and he's going to be like a 220 hitter next year.
Oh, that's not nice.
No, but doesn't it kind of feel like you see stuff like that? You have this guy that comes out, lights the world on fire for a short time, and then never does anything ever.
Well, there are a lot of cases, and we could do a whole episode just on flameouts.
Yeah.
The famous flameouts. But yeah, I like the player. I am rooting for him too.
And then you have another guy that had an equally impressive statistical season, former Indians pitcher Brad Hand, who's now been released.
Yeah. So Hand had an outlier season for himself because his career WHIP was like 1.24. He pitched to a 0.77. I think he had like 82 strikeouts and 4 walks this year, which will just totally blow you. And his FIP was like 1.37. So it was off the chart. Everything went right for him this year.
Right,
and then the Indians go, yeah, it all went right for you. You were the best pitcher. You had 16 saves for us in 60 games. We're going to cut you.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be really dangerous for a lot of teams this year, is that you really can't take too much from this year's performance, bad or good for any player, and essentially pencil them for doing that again next year.
We said that, yeah.
So, as a Met fan, we can kind of talk about this. I don't think you're counting on Pete Alonso performing in the 2021 season like he did this year. You're expecting him to get his average back up into the 260 to 280 range, while still hitting for about the same power, because he still ended up with
260 would be fine for Met fans.
If he had 260 and was still hitting with the same power, we're good. But the same way you had him underperforming, hitting as poorly as he did, I don't think any of us are counting on Michael Conforto hitting like 360.
Or Dominic Smith being that guy.
Being those level of players over a full season. So I think you're going to have to expect guys that had unbelievable years this year.
Nobody hit 400. We said that wouldn't happen, and it didn't.
You're going to see guys take a step back, but then I think you'll see other guys I think what you'll see is Conforto might not be a 360 hitter, but maybe he's a 315 hitter now. And he turns into that level of player.
And DJ LeMahieu, the Yankee second baseman, he's a free agent, but the Yankees are likely to sign him, I would think, was distinguished by winning the batting title in the American League, even over 60 games. But he is one of the few players, and here I don't remember the other that did, I think, to win batting titles in both leagues. I think Bill Madlock.
That's not easy. That's not easy to do, and especially granted, he's played in probably 2 of the most hitter-friendly ballparks in baseball.
Yeah, well, certainly Coors Field.
Yankee Stadium's pretty hitter friendly, especially because he's a left-handed batter, correct?
He is not.
He's not. Okay.
So he's not. And the Yankee Stadium traditionally is not a place where you've seen batting average champions when you think about it.
No, but it's still a hitter-friendly ballpark.
Yeah. So that was quite the distinguished season for him. And we didn't have a minor league season this year, and we didn't have a college season, and there was no high school seasons. And how does this impact baseball when it comes to having a baseball draft and saying who do you want to be on your team, and how is talent being evaluated for a lot of players who didn't really play this year?
It's going to make this year's class very, very screwy. That it's going to be really hard to evaluate them. You're going to see guys get taken massively overrated and massively underrated, and it kind of turns it into a crapshoot.
It's possible, I think, that scouting is so much more advanced than it was even 20 years ago, and the fact that a kid isn't playing on a high school season or in college, that the evaluation processes, at showcases and other places allow scouts and baseball knowledgeable people to know, okay, this guy's got it, and they didn't get to see them against competition, but that doesn't change the opinion they had of the player really before.
That I could believe, but
I had a prior opinion.
To think it's going to be more difficult to form proper opinions because they already miss when they have a full series of seasons of
and the
games.
Maturation level with a player at 16, 17, 18, 19 can happen 1 year. Look at Randy Arozarena, right?
And who knows what kind of effect having a full year of not playing games against people is going to do. Some players are going to respond. They might improve because of that. Who knows? That like a year of getting to focus on their body really helped them. And other guys will fall behind because of a year of not staying sharp in games like cause their skills to degrade.
And we could talk about the minor leagues itself because the minor leagues there's a good chance it'll never go back to the way that it was. Mm-hmm. That baseball teams have realized that they maybe don't need to support quite as many minor league teams, and it'll save them money. And they would never build the system the way that it is now because it's expensive to maintain all those players and have them under contract. And so small towns all around the U.S. where there are these minor league teams that have been a part of the fabric of the town for years and years stand to lose those teams unless they find another way to finance them, right? To make them go out there and play. That maybe they're unaffiliated and you have a team, but to date, more of the affiliations are with the major leagues than they're not by a long way.
But I think you'll still I think you'll find a way to keep those teams afloat. Because
I hope so.
I think you could see an unaffiliated league, with circuit with players playing because the minor league teams are still going to need the ability to pull players from, and you're going to want to. There might be people you're interested in, but maybe aren't good enough to play. You're going to want to have somewhere to send them where they could potentially maturate, and you could still be watching them.
And I'm going to hope that in a post-COVID world, that people are going to want to go into their town, and maybe 1,200 people are going to want to go to the ballpark and watch just a baseball game with some young, talented players. That just sort of a throwback, great feeling to be out and whatnot. So it should be interesting to see what happens with that. So we talked about player performance, and you and I both feel the same, that we can't really use what happened this year as a barometer for what's going to happen next year. So you almost are going to go back to 2019 stats.
You'll still look at this year's stats.
Except for Fernando Tatis Jr. You know that he's just going straight up.
Yeah. I think you're still going to be able to say, it's just the question is for the people that outperformed their... Like Mike Trout, he's going to still roughly be a great player next year. So you're not as worried about, his year-to-year transfers. It's for the people that really had massive over or under performances in the COVID season. Those are the people where you're going to have to kind of go back to their 2019 projections and say, okay, between the 2019 to 2020 projections and then what they actually ended up doing, where do we think he's going to fall within that? Because I don't think you're going to tell me, you're not going to look at any Met fan and tell them Pete Alonso was a 220 hitter for the rest of his career.
And you had players sit out this season, and some of those players that sat out might benefit from not the wear and tear. Buster Posey, I think of as a guy who didn't play at all this year, playing catcher his whole career. What about a year of just not playing any baseball? And what's it going to be like when you come back? You're still older as a catcher, but that probably should give him some lift early.
Should help his body, certainly. I think pitchers. You might see pitchers come into the next season very strong because they didn't spend a whole year throwing baseball.
Possibly the reason that the velocity was up so much this year because pitchers knew they didn't have to make 32 starts and they knew they could just throw it a little harder or as much as they could.
Yeah, they weren't worried about us pacing themselves as much.
Yeah. The players that you think any Hall of Fame players help their credentials, future Hall of Famers, help their credentials, do anything to solidify or
I think I think ultimately this is always going to be kind of seen as a punt season.
except for Kershaw, maybe?
Only because he won the title. Kershaw didn't need this season to get into the Hall of Fame. I think ultimately this season, even if you underperformed massively, if you're a Hall of Fame player, even if you're borderline, probably just going to get hand waved.
The only it cost you was time. It cost you time, right? If you're late in your career and you're trying to acquire 3,000 hits or whatever.
If you were a borderline player,
60 games
and
didn't help
needed
you.
like a full season to try and like help you compile that one last great season, this could hurt you. But it also might give you one extra really great season because you didn't break your body down as much this year.
Yeah. Robinson Cano had the 80-game suspension a couple of years ago. He lost 100 games this year, possible games that he could have played. So he's got that's over a season that he's at for an older player who's trying to get to 3,000 hits.
For 3,000 hits,
trying to get 3,000 hits,
not for being a Hall of Famer.
Not for being a Hall of Famer. He is one. Okay, let's have some fun. Just look around because we can't really do anything about predicting teams, right? You've got trades and
you haven't
teams
had
and managers.
Free agency,
Tony La Russa's back managing, in the major leagues at age 76.
Mets have a new owner who's the richest owner in baseball now. So, you have no idea where people are going to end up this offseason. And
Alex Cora's talking to the Red Sox. AJ Hinch is going to the Tigers.
And people forget about the players that sat out this season that are going to be back on the market next season. You have a free agent, I hate to say it, but there is Yoenis Cespedes sitting out there who's going to be playing for a contract. If he takes a 1-year deal, who knows how good that he could end up being because he wants to get paid.
Yeah. And both he and Stroman opted out this year. Cespedes played a couple of games. And I thought in part because they had personal reasons for doing so. And also there was nothing they could gain by playing this year personally.
As people that were needing a deal,
where they were in their career, what they're trying to do, and all that, there was no benefit. They were if they weren't getting a contract now, obviously, then they might as well just not play and
not risk themselves.
Yeah, not risk injury. So okay, so what's the one team in each league that you would pick next year to take a step forward, and the one team in each league that you think would take a step back, maybe?
So I think the Jays are going to be the team in the AL to take the step forward. I think this was a year where they were growing a little bit, especially towards the end. You saw kind of some of the youth.
And they didn't do anything with Nate Pearson, in terms of getting any real length out of him. But that kid's quite a pitcher and is going to be something to reckon with.
You saw the immaturity at times this season and kind of how they crumbled a little bit, especially late. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a team you can kind of expect to take a step forward next season and grow. The biggest issue is that they're in a tough division.
They are in a tough division.
In the National League, I don't know if I feel like bad picking the Mets because I don't know if you really can call that a step forward since you would more look at this year as an underperformance than anything else. So I would probably pick the Padres of then making the next step to being a team that can challenge.
Right, because they made the playoffs.
They made the playoffs, but they kind of just...
that was a big step for them to get into the playoffs. So you're saying they go deep in a deep playoff run.
And also remember, being a playoff team next season's a lot more meaningful because there's less of them.
We're not going back to 16. Folks.
We're not going back and doing this giant expanded playoff again.
Right.
So that being a playoff team would mean something because you're still having to compete against the World Series winning Dodgers in that division. It means you're probably winning the wild card, which would mean you're one of the better teams in the NL.
Right. And if I think about my two teams, an American League team that I think is going to take a step forward, I think I'm going to probably pick the White Sox to really take that next step. I like what they did this year,
and that's a very seizable division.
Right, and new manager or old manager, as you might take a look at it. And in the National League, a team that I've traditionally not liked, but for some reason I like the way their team is kind of constructed right now, the Brewers.
Interesting. Because they wouldn't be a team because they have a lot of their really most excellent players are towards the back end of their career.
Yeah, they also have some good young players too that contributed this year.
It's difficult. Like another team I would consider is picking the Reds, but I don't know. There's just
like we said before this year, and we picked them to do well, and then they did okay.
Yeah,
they did well. The pitching was really good. Their hitting hurt them, and Joey Votto's on the backside of his career a little bit, so you can't expect his production to go up anymore.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to still expect him to hit for average.
So how about a team taking a step back?
In the National League, I have to pick the Marlins. As good as they were this year, that they looked so bad in the postseason. That team just got smoked.
Yeah, yeah.
And it felt like it was the same way you're going to not count Conforto on to hit 370 next year, or whatever he hit this season, 360, 350. I'm not going to count on the Marlins to play at the same level they did over a full season like they did this year. There's always going to be a couple teams that over a 60-game stretch, everything kind of went their way.
I think it was a fluke this year myself, so I can see why you would say that. And how about the American League?
In the American League. Honestly, I think the Astros. Because that was a team that felt like an experienced team that wasn't playing well and kind of got into the World Series and then was able to find their footing. I don't know if they're able to I don't know what happened.
They're not going to have Verlander for most of the year.
I don't know
even at the age that he is, you wonder, is he going to be able to come back from this?
So I don't know what you're going to expect out of them, because if they played like they did over a full season, they might finish well. They're finishing with a losing record.
I'm pretty sure how I feel in the American League, and I'm going to pick the Rays to take a step back, because I think, Charlie Morton at 36 now, a little bit older. I think that the novelty of the way that they approach the game.
Well, the question is defining a step back for them. The fact that they made the World Series is impressive.
I think that at best they'll be a playoff team. And
they would be a while.
They might not even make the playoffs.
And that's kind of what I always had them pegged as. So I guess that is a step back.
I thought they were a possible division winner this year. So I thought they really could challenge the Yankees, and they did. The National League is a little tougher. I'm not going to pick the Braves to take a step back, because I look at all those young players and these pitchers. Where do they find these pitchers that just come out?
No, that team is too good with talent to take. You would have to have guys stepping back, taking a step back, and injury problems.
But we forget about the Cubs, and I'm going to pick the Cubs to take a step back. I just feel like they need to shake something up in Chicago. If that team goes out this year and the same way, without being much the same as it was at the end of this year, I just feel like there's something that's off.
It feels like
that chemistry there.
It feels like the same team that won the World Series, except
just 5 years later.
5 years later and older.
I agree. Yeah,
there's nothing. If you're still, you feel like it's like, okay, we're hoping that all these guys just suddenly turn back the clock.
Yeah. So we had started this sort of as a way to spend time during the pandemic, a chance for Gordon and I to do what we always do, and people who are around us know we love to talk about baseball, and we go back and forth all the time. I don't think in our wildest imagination we thought we'd get to 24 episodes.
Yeah, I've been doing this every week for this, this stretch. It's been really fun and interesting. And I definitely feel like we've come a really long way with how we run the show since our very admittedly rough first episode. And I mean, we've had a blast doing it, and it's a sad thing that now that the baseball season is over, but we didn't really want to kind of stop doing shows. Like, we wanted to keep on producing content even while the baseball season's sort of in hibernation mode. So what we're going to be doing kind of going forward is during the off season, we're going to be releasing an episode every other week. So, same time frame each week. So it's just going to be every other week now. Still going to be talking about baseball. We have a couple interesting show concepts lined up going forward, and we have some interesting things to talk about.
And to our listeners out there, and thank you for listening, by the way. We're very lucky.
We are very appreciative of people listening.
People actually want to hear us talk about this stuff. And if you have suggestions for episodes, as we have done with Lee Mark Stein, he suggested an episode, and we did that episode right at the beginning of the season. Give us a topic, and if it's something interesting, send it to us. That would be something we'd really.
We'd love to hear.
We will consider.
Yeah, we would love to hear from people. We'd love, because we come up. We have a whole big list of topics, and we're always looking for more things to talk about. And I'd love, because there's probably really interesting discussions. We look at Fangraphs, we look at all the baseball articles all the time. They're always writing things like, I never saw it. Thought to think about it that way.
Right.
I mean, I saw a really obviously a very troll post on the baseball subreddit the other day, but it was an interesting proposal if you were willing to consider it. The idea is, should you outlaw pitchers being able to throw over 95 miles an hour, basically under the guise of reducing arm injuries in pitchers, so that we're causing arm injuries by having these guys try and throw the baseball so hard.
Velocity police will be out there making sure he doesn't throw too hard.
And what would be the penalty if a guy threw over 90? But it's just interesting. Who knows? Somebody might have a crazy idea like that. We'd love to hear about it.
So, and we have some thank yous as well, and we want to start. I think you should do this thank you.
Yes, we need to thank our producer, for all of her help. She has been here every step of the way, working with us every single week, making the show, editing the show, helping us post it online. And so we just wanted to say thank you to Michelle, my mother, and my dad's wife, obviously.
Yes, thank you. You did this with real interest, and you went and you found what you needed to find in order to do this and to put this together and to put it out every week and to edit it, and we're very lucky, and we want to say thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
And also thanks to Mike Berkman, a friend of the show, who lent us the board that we use to do mixing. Someday we'll get our own board, and we won't have to use yours anymore. But for right now, we really appreciate having
your equipment has been very helpful.
And so we're sorry that the season's over in some respects, but we're going to keep going with off-season 1, and hope you keep listening.
And thank you, and we've had a great year this year. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform.
And you can follow us on Twitter at AlmostCoop.